I'm Cassie, 32, the kind of person who color codes a calendar and saves every receipt. And I landed in Portland after 16 hours of flights, dreaming of a shower in my own bathroom and tea in my own chipped mug. The taxi turned down my quiet, oak-lined street. The porch light should have been glowing, I said it that way. It wasn't. I hauled my suitcase up the steps, fished out my keys and slid the brass one into the deadbolt I'd installed myself. It stopped halfway as if the lock had a new opinion about who lived here. Once. Twice. Being gentle. Nothing. The air shifted. The house that had been my refuge for 2 years stared back at me with a black eye for a window, unblinking, unwelcoming. I rang the bell even though I knew no one was inside. Silence. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, saw my own ghost reflected and stepped back. There were a million rational reasons. Maintenance, a mistake, a storm, anything, except the one my stomach picked immediately and didn't let go. I called my mom. Straight to voicemail. I called my dad. He picked up on the third ring, cheerful as if we were mid-picnic. Pumpkin. How was Singapore? My key doesn't work, I said. Did something happen to the locks? A beat of air went missing. The soft. Come to the house. We'll talk. That sentence has its own weather system in my family. Come to the house. It means there's already a decision. You're just arriving to be told it. If you've ever walked up to a door that should have loved you back and felt it lean away, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit like if you've learned the hard way that boundaries are only as real as the people who respect them. And if stories about family lines crossed and lines redrawn resonate with you, subscribe. This one turns fast. Their living room smelled like pot roast and lemon cleaner. The TV burbled sports noise. My mother moved around the kitchen in tidy circles, not looking at me. My brother Julian lounged on the couch, sun-burnished and smug, flicking through photos on his phone. Water bungalows, infinity pools, a cocktail hollowed out of a pineapple. Check this, he said, turning the screen without hello. The Maldives is unreal. 5-star, private butler, underwater restaurant. Healing, you know. My father muted the TV and leaned forward, performative concern arranged on his face like a necktie. Let's be adults about this, he said, and in our house that was always code for I'm about to be spectacularly childish. We had to make a hard call while you were gone. He folded his hands. We sold your house. It is a strange thing hearing the floor pull away while the furniture stays. Excuse me. I said, not because I hadn't heard but because English needed another chance. We got an all-cash offer, Dad continued, warming to a sales pitch. Closed in 10 days. These things move quickly, Pumpkin. You're doing great at work. You can buy another. And your brother, well, he really needed something restorative after the breakup. My mother resurfaced, wringing a dish towel. We put it in motion for the family. We used your key so the realtor could pop in. You left your paperwork in the desk. It was practical. Julian zoomed in on a photo of azure water like he'd produced it. The villa had glass floors. You should try it sometime, sis, if you ever stop working. I felt my face smile before I decided to. It wasn't happiness. It was the body making sure the brain didn't explode in public. My father saw it, his expression twitching. What exactly is funny? Just checking the math, I said, voice calm, hands steady when nothing else was. Enjoy your evening. I took my suitcase and left before the part of me that still wanted to explain could start negotiating with people who had already cashed the check. Emma buzzed me up in pajama pants and mercy. We've been friends since freshman year. She of paint under the fingernails and big loud laugh, me of highlighters and lists. She pulled me into a hug that did the opposite of what my house had done. I welcomed. What happened? They changed the locks, I said. Then they changed the story to match. We sat on her couch. It took one breath to say, they sold my house. It took 10,000 to explain the kind of family where that sentence lands and nobody drops the plate they're holding. Emma listened without interrupting, then summed it up the way artists do. So they stole your home to buy your brother a vacation. And an SUV, I added, because honesty deserves the full ledger. She reached for her phone. We're calling the police. We will, I said. But first, I need my grandmother's lawyer. Emma frowned. Cass, why your grandma's? Because, I said, and finally let the other truth surface, the one that had made me install cameras before I left and scan documents I never wanted to need. The house isn't quite what they think it is. I grew up learning that love in our house moved like water toward the lowest ground, toward Julian. I learned that reliability is invisible, that being the easy kid makes you furniture useful and unnoticed. I learned my grandmother Margaret's version of love instead: steady, practical, quietly fierce. We don't measure people by how loudly they need, she would say, slicing tomatoes with a knife she kept sharp. We measure them by whether they give back what they take. Before she died, Grandma Margaret set up a trust. She never advertised it. She never bragged. She just signed papers in a small office with a view of a maple tree and looked at me and said, "I can't stop people from being who they are, but I can stop them from turning you into a purse." That trust bought my house. On paper I held title. In reality I held responsibility. There was a clause written in a lawyer's stern grammar: if any family member attempts to misappropriate, convert, or otherwise interfere with trust assets, they forfeit all future distributions. Forever. I told Emma the short version. "It's a trust property," I said. "There's a forfeiture clause. And I have footage." Footage. "Hidden cameras," I said. "Office, living room, front hall. Cloud backup." The part of her that loves a good reveal lit up. "Cassie, tell me you caught them practicing your signature at the dining table." "Emma," I said. "I caught my mother looping the C the wrong way 3 times before my father leaned over and said, 'She hooks the end of the E. Do it again.'" We were quiet a minute, the kind of quiet that lets anger move from messy to useful. If you've ever been told you're the strong one, and watched that label become permission for people to pile more on your back, I said into the dark of Emma's living room, drop a comment and tell me what finally made you say enough. And if you're watching this because you need someone to go first, hit like so YouTube shows this to the next person who's trying to hold a boundary that keeps getting bulldozed. Subscribe if you want to see what happens when paper, video, and a very patient detective meet a very loud family. At 9 a.m. I called Mr. Harrison, the attorney whose blue ink signature lived under my grandmother's. "Cassie," he said, warm voice, courtroom steel underneath. "I was about to call you. Some documents crossed my desk that concern me. Are you selling your house?" "No," I said. "But someone tried to do it for me." He inhaled the way people do when they measure their words. "Come in." His office smelled like legal pads and lemon oil. He was 65, silver hair, a tie that didn't call attention to itself. He didn't waste time. "Your trustee," he said, hands folded. "Only you can authorize transfer. Anything else is fraud. And given what you've told me, we're invoking the prevention provisions." He slid my grandmother's trust across the desk, his fingertip tapping the paragraph my memory knew by outline. "This clause is why she hired me." He walked me through the map. Police report with evidence attached, notice to the title company, immediate contact with the purchasers, innocent likely, a petition to unwind trust enforcement. It would be slow, he warned, but solid. "And there's something you don't know," he added carefully. "The house wasn't the only asset. Your grandmother invested very wisely over 30 years. Scheduled distributions were set for your 35th birthday. Smaller ones for your parents and Julian, conditional on respecting the trust." My stomach did the math and tilted. "Which they've now forfeited." "I'm afraid so," he said. "Your grandmother anticipated difficult patterns. She loved you fiercely but planned for the family she had." We looped in Detective Ramirez, a woman with the kind of calm that makes truth hurry up. She watched the clips on Emma's laptop, pausing and replaying without commentary while my mother practiced my name until the letters wore grooves in the page. "This is clear," she said. "Forgery, fraud, theft by deception. We'll need statements from the agent and the buyers. We'll proceed." The buyers were the Millers, 2 people who had believed a story in a hot market, relocating for work, a seller in a hurry. We met at Mr. Harrison's office with coffee and apologies. They were startled, then resolute. "We don't want to be part of anything illegal," Mrs. Miller said. "We'll cooperate." We promised they'd be made whole. Fees, small renovations, moving costs, the administrative mess. Victims alongside me swept into a family weather pattern they hadn't forecast. I called my cousin David, the one relative who can spot hypocrisy at 50 paces. He had news I didn't love but didn't find surprising. The sale had brought in $420,000. The Maldives wound had cost just under $70,000. The new SUV $60,000. The rest sat in a joint account being nibbled by restaurants that monogram napkins and stores that spell boutique with extra vowels. And this isn't the first time, David said carefully. After Grandma died, there was talk. Your dad asked around about contesting. He thought there had to be more. There was. There always had been. Thanks, I said. Can you do one more thing for me? Name it. Help me get them all in a room. I wanted witnesses. Not for spectacle, for clarity. People who had watched favoritism play dress up as, he just needs more support for decades should see what it looked like once the receipts went up on a wall. We booked the private room at Riverside. Floor-to-ceiling windows over the Willamette, linen heavy enough to iron out lies. Emma handled AV like she was born with an HDMI cable in her hand. Mr. Harrison prepared notices. Detective Ramirez agreed to attend in an unofficial capacity, ready to take formal statements after. David made calls that sounded like olive branches. Cassie wants to clear the air. Family dinner. Let's be civil. The group text in response from my father read, good. Let's end this drama. You overreacted. If you've been told that your reaction is the problem, not the injury, tap like so this gets to more people who need language for what they're living. And tell me in the comments, what's the one sentence that helped you stop apologizing for other people's choices? In the 2 days before the dinner, I slept in clips. 30 minutes here, 40 there. Jet lag and adrenaline make a weird soup. Emma kept feeding me toast. Mr. Harrison distilled our plan into a page I could hold and not hyperventilate. Police report filed. Title insurer notified. Rescission in progress. Trust clause triggered. Restitution sought. The detective interviewed the realtor, who had a lot of I assumed the daughter knew, and one too many your dad said for my taste. The night before, I opened the box of things my grandmother left me that had nothing to do with money. A hummingbird brooch, a recipe card in her slanted hand for lemon bars. Use parchment or you'll be sorry. And a note. Love is generous. Boundaries are too. You won't confuse them when you remember which one protects which. At 6:30, the private room filled with people who share my last name and my bone structure and not much else. Aunt Elaine. Uncle Thomas. My mother's brother Samuel and his wife. Cousin Patricia. The ones who had nodded at holidays when my father made a joke at my expense. The ones who had watched Julian get second and third chances and called it loving. My parents were late. Of course they were. You arrive like that when you think time belongs to you. When they came in, my mother clutched a new handbag like a flotation device. My father smiled like a man walking into court with a friend on the bench. Julian scroll walked, narrating his own feed under his breath. Family dinner, Dad said as if he'd invented the concept. Good idea. Let's eat, I said. We talk after. We did. Roast chicken that tasted like nothing. Polite laughter that sounded like typing. Julian explained manta rays to a room that did not ask about sea life. I sipped water and watched the sun drag a gold line down the river and off the edge of the glass. Dessert plates arrived. Mr. Harrison slipped in, quiet as a gavel. Detective Ramirez followed, a presence like gravity. Emma hooked up the laptop. The projector hummed through blue onto white. My father blinked at the light and tried out a frown. Cassie, he said, rising, if this is about your feelings, we can. It's about facts, I said. Watch. The first clip. My front door opening with my key from my mother's ring. The second. My father in my office, thumbing through file folders until he turned to Julian, paper held like prey. Here it is. Equity's great. More than enough. The third. My mother at my dining table, legal forms in neat stacks, practicing my signature on a notepad. She looped the C too tight, shook her wrist, tried again. My father leaned over her shoulder, the top of his head filling the frame. No. She hooks the end. Make it look natural. Someone in the room made a sound I can only spell as O. Turn that off, my father snapped, voice hitting the place where threat thinks it's going to work. This is private family business. Fraud isn't private, I said steady. And family business shouldn't require a forgery tutorial. Detective Ramirez stepped forward enough to be seen. We'll need statements after, she said mild. For now, let her finish. The fourth clip. A realtor walking through my house, FaceTiming my mother from my bedroom. The fifth. My father in the garage taking photos of the water heater serial number for the disclosure. The sixth. My mother signing with my name, then blowing on the page like ink needs air. The room did what rooms do when truth arrives with evidence. It got very, very still. Even the river seemed to hold its breath. "Here's what happens next," I said, turning from the screen to the people. "The sale is being unwound. The title insurer is involved. The buyers will be made whole, they are victims too. The police are investigating the forgery and the fraud. And Mr. Harrison lifted the trust, one page open. His voice was the kind that reads verdicts. And the Margaret Collins Trust contains a specific provision. Any family member who attempts to misappropriate, convert, or otherwise interfere with trust assets immediately and irrevocably forfeits all rights to any distribution under the trust." My father's face went through 3 weather patterns. He landed on indignation. "What trust?" "The one your mother set up," Mr. Harrison said. "The one that purchased the property and several other investments. There were scheduled distributions, provided the terms were respected." My mother's hand found the back of a chair. "How much?" Mr. Harrison didn't blink. "$250,000 each to you and to Julian at Cassie's 35th. A smaller annuity thereafter. Access to the Bend cabin for summer. All conditioned. All now forfeited." Julian stood so fast his chair scraped. "You can't do that." "You did it," I said softly. "When you turned my house into a bank." My father finally reached for the oldest card in the deck. "We are your parents. We put a roof over your head. You owe." "I owed you respect," I said. "And I gave it. I owed you gratitude for basic parenting. I gave that too. But I do not owe you my house. I do not owe you my future. And I do not owe you complicity." I looked at my aunts and uncles and cousins, people who'd witnessed a subtler version of this for years and called it just how families are. "I didn't ask you here to take sides," I said. "I asked you here because truth goes slippery when it's whispered in kitchens. I wanted you to see it." Detective Ramirez nodded once. "When we're done here," she said, "I'll take statements." My father pulled out his phone and typed. 10 seconds later, my own phone lit up with a text from him, a last attempt to control a story that had outgrown his part in it. "You're not welcome in this family until you fix what you've done." I put the phone face down like a fly. "Here's what I'm going to do," I said, not to him but to the room, to anyone watching now who needed someone to move first. "I'm going to make sure the buyers are okay. I'm going to take my house back. I'm going to enforce the trust my grandmother built to keep me safe. And then I'm going to build a version of family where 'we love you' and 'we respect you' are the same sentence." I nodded to Emma. She clicked to the next clip. My father in my living room, looking directly into the camera he doesn't know is there, tugging at his sleeves like he's about to introduce a keynote. "She'll never know," he's saying. "By the time she's back it'll be done. And what can she do?" The projector light hummed. The river kept moving. Someone's fork touched porcelain with a small bell's chime. I took a breath that felt like pulling a rope hand over hand, and when I looked up I could see it land. The moment when a room realizes there isn't a softer version of what it just watched. The truth was on the wall. The table had nothing left to do but hold its weight. Detective Ramirez clicked her pen once, the unofficial signal that the tone was changing from family dinner to formal statements. He kept it simple: full name, date of birth, relation, where were you when. People try complicated stories when they're scared. A good detective asks simple questions and lets the lies tangle themselves. My mother's voice trembled on the first answer and steadied by the third. My father's answers came clipped, lawyerly, like he could cross-examine his way back into the house he no longer controlled. Julian avoided eye contact with the projector screen as if the pixels might blink first. When the detective finished, she handed each of them a card with a case number and a time to appear for formal interviews at the station. Mr. Harrison slid an envelope across the table to my father, another to my mother, and a third to Julian. Certified copies, notarized, the kind of paper you can feel. Each one invoked the clause my grandmother had put in motion when she signed a trust instead of a wish. "You'll hear from the title company," Mr. Harrison said calmly. "They are freezing the title and rescinding the transfer. The buyers will be made whole. Cassie will be restored to possession. From there we'll unwind the rest." My father opened his envelope, scanned lines like they were in a language he hadn't consented to learn, and then looked up. "You blindsided us," he said, as if the footage we'd all watched had been a magic trick I pulled from a hat. "You set us up." "I set up cameras in my own home," I said. And I told you I'd be out of the country. You could have come to us privately, he pressed. Handled this as a family. We tried handling things as a family for 32 years, I said softly. This is what that produced. He almost smiled. You've always had a flair for the dramatic. It's funny how people who've benefited from your silence call the first time you speak drama. I didn't correct him. The room was doing that for me. Dinner's over, I said, standing. We'll take this back to offices where paper does what it's supposed to. I didn't slam the door when I left. I've learned the quieter you are, the more the echo tells your story. The next morning, Mr. Harrison's conference room held a different kind of family. The kind that shows up with binders and timetables and a coffee that tastes like it intends to get you through. Emma sat to my right, her sketchbook open, a pen tucked behind her ear. Detective Ramirez dialed in from the precinct for the first 10 minutes, ticking through what she needed. Copies of the documents, metadata from the cameras, the realtor's number. She spoke in verbs, file, send, sign, not adjectives. Mr. Harrison laid out the plan like a map. Step 1, title notice is already recorded, he said, tapping a folder. That clouds the title and prevents the property from changing hands again. Step 2, possession order. We'll petition the court to return you to the property while rescission is pending. Step 3, coordination with the buyers, the Millers, to ensure they are reimbursed for any improvements, fees, and moved costs. Step 4, trust enforcement. These letters are formal notice that your father, mother, and brother have forfeited all future distributions under the Margaret Collins Trust. Will they try to contest it? I asked. Almost certainly, he said. And they will fail. Your grandmother's trust was drafted precisely to withstand this. What about the money? Emma asked. They spent a lot. Mr. Harrison's mouth flattened. The bank account with the remaining sale proceeds is already flagged. A portion will be frozen pending the criminal case and restitution order. The trip and the SUV. Some funds may be unrecoverable. But we will chase every dollar we can. The word chase did something steady to my breathing. You can be the kind of person who gets chased your whole life. By expectations, by a story about who you're supposed to be. Felt good to turn around. We called the Millers from Mr. Harrison's office to set up a meeting. They arrived with a manila folder of receipts and that particular posture people carry when they've done nothing wrong but have to defend it anyway. I'm so sorry, I said before they could apologize. I didn't know you until this week, but I'll be telling anyone who asks that you were decent from minute one. Mrs. Miller's shoulders dropped half an inch. We've been staying at a hotel because we moved out of our short-term rental, she said. Our cat hates it. Let us handle housing for the next 2 weeks, I said. Pet fee included. Mr. Harrison will see to reimbursement. They blinked like people do when someone in a story finally makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Miller said. He glanced down at our joint mile of paper. I hope you get your home back. I will, I said. And I hope you get your peace back. When they left, Emma leaned back and exhaled. Okay, she said. I want to live in a world where those two get everything they want. Same, I said. Starting with quiet. Mr. Harrison slid me another folder. This is for you, he said. Keys the court will recognize once the possession order is signed. I expect that to happen within 72 hours. I stood and was surprised to find my legs steady. Let's go finish the part where we tell the truth to the police. Portland Police isn't a TV set. The chairs are scotch-taped. The coffee tastes like late night. Detective Ramirez recorded my statement in a small room with a window that looked like obedience. Tell me in your own words, she said, and I did. Everything from the email that first offered me Singapore to the lemon bar recipe I found in my grandmother's box. She didn't rush me. She didn't sympathize out loud. She nodded, made notes, asked for dates. What do you want from this? She asked finally after the facts were in neat stacks. Pie house back, I said. And for the truth to hold. The rest is math. She clicked off the recorder. You've done everything right. Some of it will move fast. Some of it will feel slower than weather. When it's slow, call me anyway. Do you always say that? I asked. She almost smiled. Only when I mean it. If you've ever had to learn the difference between a system that ignores you and a person inside a system who refuses to, tell me in the comments. I'm not going to ask you to share any details that hurt, But telling the truth about one good cop, one patient clerk, one attorney who didn't roll their eyes can help someone else keep going. And if you're finding this useful, tap like so more people in the middle of this kind of mess can see it. Subscribe if you want the next chapters. The paperwork, the courtroom, the part where a judge reads a sentence that finally sounds like accountability. News travels in families like smoke, thin at first, then in your lungs. By evening, my cousin David texted, "Brace yourself, there's a version going around where you entrapped them." I typed back, "I invited them to dinner and then pressed play on their own behavior." David replied with 3 clapping emojis and a link to Julian's social feed, which had gone from underwater selfies to a screenshot of a Notes app speech about forgiveness and how money shouldn't matter to family. Tempted to reply? Emma asked, peeking at my phone as we waited in line for takeout. Tempted to ignore, I said. They don't get to decide the headline. We agreed on a statement the way you agree on paint color. Try 3 options and step back to see which one doesn't make you flinch. I posted it the next morning, a plain text block without a filter. I didn't ask for a war. I asked for boundaries. My home was sold without my consent while I was out of the country. The sale is being unwound. The buyers will be reimbursed. The police are involved. I have a grandmother to thank for the legal tools I needed, and a friend to thank for reminding me that truth doesn't whisper to be polite. If you're going through something similar, I see you. This is me choosing safety and accountability over silence. I closed the app and opened my email. There were messages from strangers. Some mean, most kind. A woman in Ohio sent a 2-sentence story about her brother taking out a credit card in her name when she was 19. A man in Arizona said he wished his kid had had a Grandma Margaret. I saved those emails in a folder titled Proof. 72 hours later, Mr. Harrison called at 9:07 a.m. "Orders signed," he said. "You have legal possession. Want company?" I did. We drove to my street in his steady sedan. Emma followed in her hatchback with a trunk full of supplies. Trash bags, gloves, a small toolbox, a lemon-scented cleaner she swore could heal a nation. The porch light was off again. I touched the casing reflexively, then slid the court order keys into the new lock and turned. It clicked like a polite handshake. The door swung open on hinges that still squeaked the way I never got around to fixing. If houses could talk, this one would have cleared its throat. The living room was cleaner than I expected and wrong in ways that had nothing to do with dust. The throw blanket my grandmother crocheted was folded in half the way my mother folds things. 2 tight, sharp corners. The books on the shelf had been resorted by color, not by what I reach for in the morning. Self-help in a rainbow I would never choose. The small chip in my favorite mug had been turned toward the wall like a shame. Emma stepped in behind me, the weight of the place landing on her face. "Okay," she said softly. "We're going to make this yours again." I walked through every room, touching the edges like you touch the walls of a body you know by heart. In the office, the desk drawer where I kept my documents showed the faint scratches of rings that didn't belong to me. In the bedroom, the duvet cover had been ironed. My mother's version of love is neatness. On the kitchen counter, a small note remained in my mother's handwriting. "Garbage day is Thursday. Don't forget the bins." "Do you want to throw everything out and start over?" Emma asked. "Or do you want to take it back piece by piece?" "Piece by piece," I said. That's how they took it from me. We opened windows. We aired out the sense that something had been rehearsed here. I turned the porch light on in daylight. Symbolic maybe, but one of my favorite kinds of magic is the kind you make up. Emma hung the crocheted throw over the back of the couch the way I always do, imperfectly, a little askew. I put the chipped mug on the hook with the chip facing out. By afternoon, the house smelled like lemons and paper and the good tired you get after moving furniture 2 inches in every direction until it finally clicks. Halfway through cleaning the office, I found a slip of paper under the rug. A practice page, my name written over and over in my mother's hand. The C started tight and loosened, the E grew the hook my father had suggested. I stared at it a long minute and then dropped it in the shredder. It ate the paper and made a tidy confetti I could put in a bin. At 4, the Millers stopped by with their contractor to walk through the improvements they'd started. They were careful, kind, apologetic about the way paint samples stuttered up the hallway where they'd been trying to pick a white that didn't look like a hospital. "I like this one," I said, tapping the 3rd down. "It looks like morning." "Keep it," Mrs. Miller insisted. "It's yours. We're going to reimburse you for all of it," I said. "And if you're still looking for a neighborhood, I have a friend who just decided to rent her place 2 streets over. They left with a handshake and something like relief. We stood on my porch and watched them drive away. You know you didn't do anything wrong, Emma said, following my eyes. I know, I said. But it helps to see decent people on a day like this. We spent the evening in a kind of liturgy. I pulled weeds in the back garden my grandmother would have named if she were here. Dandelion, chickweed, purslane, all the plants that survive anyway. Emma wiped down baseboards and played music that makes kitchens brighter. We ate takeout on the floor because I didn't want to sit at the table that had learned how to hold forged letters the week before. Round 9 there was a knock. Mr. Harrison. He looked at the porch light and smiled. Good choice, he said. He came in to sign one last paper, then sat for a minute on the arm of a chair the way people do when they could stay or go. They called me, he said. Your parents. They're unhappy with the trust. Of course, I said. What did they think it was for? To protect you, he said. Which it is doing. Sometimes protection looks like denial, I said. Sometimes it looks like a lock. He nodded. You're handling this with more grace than most people twice your age. I have lemon cleaner and a friend with a label maker, I said. And a grandmother who believed in specifics. The calls started the next morning. Not from my parents, they moved from demanding to silent. But from people orbiting them. Aunt Elaine, I'm ashamed of myself for not speaking up sooner. Uncle Thomas, your father is beside himself, Cassie. Perhaps there's a compromise. Cousin Patricia, if you need me to write a statement about what I saw, I will. I said thank you where it fit, I said no where it needed to live, and I wrote everything down like I was building a bridge with receipts. Mr. Harrison compiled, collated, and filed. Detective Ramirez sent a short text that wasn't quite reassurance and wasn't quite instruction. Interviews today went as expected. I'll update you tomorrow. By noon, Mr. Harrison forwarded an email from the title company. Sale flagged as fraudulent. Rescission in progress. Funds held. These are not dramatic words. They are better. At 3, the bank called to confirm the freeze on the joint account my parents had opened. We've received notice from law enforcement, the manager said carefully. Pending the outcome, disbursements are suspended. Please direct any inquiries to the case number. How much is left? I asked. A little under $260,000, she said. I'm sorry for what you're going through. I hung up and did the math in my head, what had been spent and where, the SUV, the plane tickets, the villas, the dinners that came with clean napkins and dirty looks. I thought about my brother's Instagram stories. Sunsets and angles, captions that used the word healing like a coupon. Emma came in from the backyard with her hands covered in soil. You okay? Doing numbers, I said. It's not satisfying, but it is clarifying. She wiped her hands on a towel and sat beside me on the floor. Say the thing again. What thing? The thing your grandmother wrote in that note. I closed my eyes and let my voice find her handwriting. Love is generous. Boundaries are too. You won't confuse them when you remember which one protects which. Good, Emma said. Now say the YouTube thing. I laughed. Okay. I looked at the camera like there were 10 people in the room. Midway point, I said. If you're still here, you probably know someone who has the same last name as you and doesn't know the meaning of the word no. Tell me the smallest boundary you're going to protect this week. A lock you change, a key you don't hand over, a document you scan and keep. Tap like so this finds the next person who needs to remember that preparedness isn't paranoia. And subscribe if you want the next part. The courtroom, the restitution, and the moment I realized the house wasn't the only thing I needed to reclaim. The formal interviews took place over 2 days. My mother arrived in a navy blazer she wears to church and bad news. She cried when the recorder clicked on and again when it clicked off. She told a story in which everything had been a misunderstanding. She thought I'd be grateful, she thought she had my permission, she thought signatures were formalities in families. My father arrived with a lawyer and a tone. He asked for the interview to be rescheduled twice, then tried to dictate which questions could be asked. When he realized that wasn't how any of this worked, he pivoted to what he does best: certainty. She left the key, he said. We are her parents. Families shift resources where they are needed. Resources, Detective Ramirez repeated, neutral as a measuring cup. Like a house. He bristled. Like money. She has it. Who paid the down payment? She asked. He didn't answer. Julian wore a hoodie and the expression of someone who believes the world should apologize to him for waking up. He called the trip essential self-care. He said he was fragile. He used the word betrayal about a relationship that lasted 13 weeks. When the detective asked him if he knew where the funds for the trip came from, he said he assumed there was family money. What did you assume the word family meant? Detective Ramirez asked. He stared at the wall and said nothing. The recorder kept time. Mr. Harrison filed the trust enforcement action in probate court on a Wednesday. On Friday, a judge with tidy hair and a voice like the end of a sentence signed an order affirming the forfeiture. The language was surgical, irrevocably, immediately, with prejudice. My grandmother's foresight had held. My parents, predictably, tried to appeal. The court, predictably, declined to humor them. Their attorney sent Mr. Harrison a letter that used the words harsh and unfair like magic spells. Mr. Harrison wrote back with citations. The letter didn't so much end as conclude. The criminal case moved forward like a train with a schedule. The DA's office reviewed the footage and the documents and the bank records. There were meetings. There were offers. There were phrases like plea and probation and restitution, words that rank behind rescission in drama and ahead of it in usefulness. 2 years probation for your father, the DA's assistant said in a call Mr. Harrison had me on. Restitution in the amount we can prove is recoverable. Community service. Your mother similar. Your brother, accessory and receiving stolen property, 1 year probation and restitution. Or they can roll the dice at trial. They'll take the deal, Mr. Harrison said. He was right. When the plea hearing arrived, I didn't want theater, but I wanted to be there. Not to watch them punished. To watch the truth keep going until it reached the end of the hallway. Courtrooms are weirdly small when your whole history is sitting in one. The judge read the charges. My parents said guilty in voices I barely recognized. Julian said guilty, and then looked at me like I was the one who had made the word heavy. The judge turned his attention my way. Miss Thompson, you have the right to address the court, he said. I stood. My statement was a page long. I read it without shaking because my grandmother had taught me that recipes and testimony both benefit from exact measurements. I didn't mention the Maldives or the SUV. I talked about trust. About the 15-year-old who learned that being the strong one is sometimes permission for people to take. About a house that took me 4 jobs and 10,000 small decisions to buy. About forgiveness that belongs to me and will take the time it takes. When I finished, the judge nodded once. Thank you, he said. He turned back to my parents and his voice lost the softness it had afforded me. You did not make a mistake, he said. You made a series of choices. You will make a series of others now. The gavel tapped. It sounded like a door closing and another one opening somewhere else. People think the first night back in your house after something like this is triumphant. It isn't. It's quiet and strange, and you can hear the refrigerator shudder and the floor creak under the places people stood when they thought you'd never find out. I slept in the guest room for a week. Not because the bed was more comfortable, but because my bedroom was a story I needed to rewrite. Emma slept on the couch the first 2 nights and left her toothbrush in my bathroom like a claim. We made small rituals that said loudly in case the walls were listening, this is ours. Saturday morning lemon bars using parchment like the card said. Fresh flowers on the mantel, not arranged, just gathered. Shoes by the door in a pattern only I would put them in. A lock on the office drawer that clicks with a satisfying certainty. We planted new rose bushes in the backyard in a line that doesn't make sense to anyone but me. I named them like ships. Emma rolled her eyes and helped anyway. Neighbors started stopping by with casseroles and we had no idea faces. I thanked them and meant it. You can build a life without a street. It's better with one. At work, my boss slid a folder across my desk with a raise and a promotion in it I had earned before all this but could finally accept without feeling like I was bargaining with my childhood. We're behind you, she said. Take whatever time you need to settle the home stuff. Your clients love you. So do our numbers. I said thank you, but what I wanted to say was, I am learning to separate the two. If you're someone who's had to perform at work while the floor at home was a trampoline, drop a still here in the comments. No details, just proof of life. Tap like if you've ever brought a laptop to a courthouse parking lot. Subscribe if you want the next arc, renovation, restoration, and a conversation I never expected. The one where my mother sits at my kitchen table without papers and asks a question she's never asked me before. The restitution schedule arrived like a syllabus. Dates, amounts, consequences. It was clinical. It was good. My father sold watches he'd collected, and my mother sold the SUV she'd bought so recently its new car smell was still practicing. Julian sold sneakers and a gaming console and a story about how this would make him stronger. He moved in with a friend who charges rent that doesn't care about your feelings. David called to check in the day my parents put a for sale sign in their yard. They're leaving this neighborhood, he said. They say the people aren't friendly anymore. Funny, I said. I've never found friendliness to be about zip codes. You okay? He asked. I'm better than that, I said. I'm honest. Late one night, my phone buzzed with a number I recognized but hadn't saved. Julian. The text was 3 words. This is hard. I stared at it for a long time. I typed and deleted a dozen drafts that ranged from biting to holy. I set the phone face down and slept without answering. You don't owe anyone your immediate response, especially not someone who only texts when gravity sets in. The next morning I wrote back. Accountability always is. I hope you take it seriously. I do not want updates. It was the kindest sentence I could send that wasn't a new invitation to an old pattern. Emma brought over paint swatches on Sunday and held them up against the wall while we argued in the way happy people do. We ended up picking 3 shades of white with names that made us laugh. Early Snow, Softshell, Moon Milk, and painted until midnight. I got a smear of moon milk on my cheek and left it there as a dare to the version of me who likes to win more than she likes to play. By July the house was mine again in more than just law. The light knew where to fall. The floorboards sang the songs I taught them. My grandmother's lemon bars refused to crack if I followed directions like she was watching. I took the key my mother had used to let a stranger into my kitchen and turned it into a wind chime with a string and a circle of driftwood I found at the river. It clinked small music into the afternoons. People will tell you revenge is loud. Sometimes the best kind is a sound only you hear. In September, the probate court held one final hearing to memorialize the trust enforcement and close the loop my grandmother started with a signature and a maple tree outside a window. I wore a simple black dress and carried a copy of the trust in my bag not because I needed to show it to anyone but because sometimes you hold paper like you hold hands. The judge asked if anyone wished to be heard. My parents' attorney rose and recited a paragraph about undue severity and familial bonds. The judge listened without interrupting, then closed the file with the kind of gentle finality I wish I could gift to anyone watching this. Miss Thompson, he said, your grandmother was wise. The court affirms her wisdom. I nodded and felt a knot that had lived under my breastbone since I was 8 finally loosen a little. Outside, the air smelled like rain had been here 5 minutes ago. Mr. Harrison shook my hand and then surprisingly hugged me. You did it, he said. We did it, I said. My grandmother did. Emma, who had filmed none of this for obvious reasons but would have made it beautiful if she had linked her arm through mine. Lemon bars tonight? She asked. With parchment, I said. We walked to the car. My phone buzzed with another text from Julian. This time it was longer. I got a job. It's not much, but it's something. I know you don't want updates. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for the consequences. For the way I've been. I don't expect an answer. I stood on the curb and read it twice. I didn't cry. I didn't send a paragraph back or a thumbs up. I wrote, I hope you mean it. Take care of yourself. It landed somewhere between kindness and boundary, which is where I want to live. Emma watched me put the phone in my bag. Ready? She asked. For lemon bars. Always, I said. When we got back to my house, I opened the kitchen drawer where I keep parchment and pulled out the note my grandmother had written on the back of her recipe the year I told her I was saving for a house. The garden you plant will be the one you tend. She had underlined will be with a steady hand. I set out the sugar and the flour and the butter. I zest lemons like I meant it. Emma turned on music and danced with a whisk. The oven preheated. The house warmed from the inside out. If you're here because you needed to watch someone build something back piece by piece, tell me one small thing you're going to reclaim this week. A drawer. A password. A morning routine no one gets a vote in. Hit like so this finds one more person who thinks their only choices are swallow it or start a war. Subscribe if you want the last leg of this story. The day we lit the porch for real and the people who walked up it anyway. The restitution check that arrived with a signature that finally looked like truth. And the night I realized my grandmother hadn't just safeguarded a house. She had safeguarded the way I would define family from here forward. Because that's what comes next. A knock at the door I don't expect, a conversation at my kitchen table that doesn't involve a single form to sign, and a future that stops asking me to earn my welcome. The knock came just as the lemon bars set. Not the rat-a-tat of a delivery, not the polite double tap of a neighbor. A single, steady knock that said the person on the other side wasn't in a hurry to be anyone else. Emma glanced at me. I wiped my hands, flipped the porch light on, daylight still out, symbolism still welcome, and opened the door. The Millers stood there with a clay pot between them, soil still damp, a small lemon sapling tilting toward our porch bulb like it knew which way home was. Their contractor hovered a respectful step back, holding a paper bag full of paint samples I recognized from the hall. "We didn't want to text," Mrs. Miller said. "We wanted to say thank you for handling all of this the way you did. And to give you this." She nodded at the sapling. "We thought maybe your yard had room for one more beginning." "It does," I said. "Thank you." We talked for 10 minutes, the kind of talk that wraps things up without pretending nothing happened. When they left, I set the sapling on the counter beside the cooling lemon bars, a strange little lineup of circles. Sun, fruit, plate. The second knock came an hour later, after we'd cut squares and stacked them on parchment like gold. This one I knew before I opened it. Mothers have a gravity, you feel them in your chest first. She was alone. No handbag that cost an apology. No father at her shoulder. No words queued up behind her tongue like soldiers. She held a shoebox I recognized from my grandmother's closet. "May I come in?" she asked. "We'll sit on the porch," I said, and nodded to the bench under the light. She didn't flinch at the boundary, which felt like the first true thing she'd done in months. We sat with the box between us like neutral ground. "I found these in storage," she said, lifting the lid. Inside, recipe cards in my grandmother's slanted hand, a photograph of me pulling carrots with dirt under my nails, a tiny tin that used to hold her thimbles and now held paper clips. On top of everything, a key on a faded ribbon. My mother set the key in my palm. "I don't get to have this anymore," she said. "I'm sorry it took a court to teach me the difference between can and may." There were 100 ways she could have phrased that to make herself the protagonist. She didn't pick any of them. We were quiet long enough to hear the wind move through the maple down the street. "I practiced your signature," she said finally, voice low. "On our dining table. Felt like pretending to be you would hurt less than admitting I'd never really looked at you. I'm not asking you to forgive me because the ink dried. I'm asking you to tell me what respect looks like now. A year ago, I would have drafted a monologue. Tonight, I took a breath and gave her 3 sentences I could live with. Respect looks like not rewriting the story. It looks like no access, no keys, no requests until I offer it. It looks like apologies to the people you hurt that don't include the word, but." She nodded, eyes wet but unarmed. "I've started seeing someone," she said, meaning a therapist. "I should have done it years ago." "Good," I said. "Keep going." We didn't hug. We didn't pretend this was a beginning that erased the middle. She handed me an envelope before she left. "From your grandmother," she said. "She gave it to me when she set up the trust, told me to give it to you when I had nothing left to protect but the truth." Inside, a single sheet of paper in my grandmother's handwriting. No legalese. No clauses. Just a line I'd heard as a child and now understood like a woman. "If they make you choose between their peace and your person, choose your person. Peace borrowed from you doesn't last." After she left, Emma and I planted the sapling by the kitchen window where the morning would find it. We buried the ribboned key at the roots. When we watered it, the soil took the shape of the pot and then softened, accepting its new place. 2 weeks later, the restitution check arrived by certified mail. Cashier's funds, the memo line left blank. Signatures neat because they had to be. There was a separate envelope with a money order for the first of Julian's payments and a note in his handwriting that made my name look like an apology. I didn't frame any of it. I scanned the documents for the file and handed the originals to Mr. Harrison. Accountability belongs in a drawer with a label, not on a mantle like a trophy. We lit the porch for real on a Friday night. Bulb replaced with the warm kind, a string of soft lights wound through the railing like a sentence that isn't in a rush. People came. Not everyone who said they would, and not one person who had been waiting to see whether I'd cave. David brought sparkling water and a story about our aunt's new rescue dog. The Millers brought a photo of their cat napping on their new windowsill. Mr. Harrison brought paper plates and the kind of smile attorneys don't know they have until something goes right. Detective Ramirez came in plain clothes and left before anyone could make her answer questions off the clock, which is its own kind of boundary. We ate lemon bars on napkins that didn't match. Emma made a toast with her elbows still dusted in flour. To houses that don't keep secrets, she said. To friends who bring their own chairs. To grandmothers who write instructions on the backs of recipes because they know you'll eventually look. I looked around my porch. The steps where I'd cried, the light I'd turned on in daylight just to be sure, the people who had walked up anyway. Home is not a prize for good behavior. It's a place you choose and then choose again and then defend with locks and light and sentences you practice until you can say them without shaking. Weeks blurred into a new kind of normal. My mornings belonged to coffee and a stretch in the backyard that made my neighbors think I'd finally gotten into yoga. My work calendar held hard stops at 6 and a reminder to walk around the block before I answered any text that made old instincts twitch. The trust work with Mr. Harrison turned into something I cared about more than revenge. The foundation under my grandmother's name expanded from scholarships to small emergency grants for people who needed $400 to not lose a semester or a lease. I watched the thank you emails come in, short, stunned sentences that sounded like oxygen, and thought this is how you turn a wound into a door. My mother wrote once more, a letter without ask or argument. A list really, therapy sessions attended, amends made. She included copies of apology notes to the Millers and the realtor, and a line I didn't expect to see. I will never ask you to make me comfortable at the cost of your safety. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because sometimes the kindest answer you can give history is time. Julian texted less and worked more. David said he wore a sunburn to Thanksgiving because he'd been outside detailing cars all week. I sent no money. I sent no scolds. I sent once, on a Tuesday, 3 words my grandmother might have chosen. Keep showing up. On the anniversary of the night the locks changed, Emma and I hosted a small dinner. We set out the good plates in a room that no longer flinched at the thought of guests. The conversation stayed in the present tense. We laughed about small stupid things. A squirrel that kept stealing herbs, my inability to fold fitted sheets, the way Emma names houseplants like coworkers. At the end of the night, when the porch was quiet again and the dishwasher hummed its steady endless song, I opened the kitchen drawer, found the recipe card with my grandmother's lemon bars, and wrote along the margin like she used to. It tastes like survival but sweeter. If you stayed with me to the end, tell me the sentence you needed most tonight. Maybe it was, choose your person. Maybe it was, keep showing up. Maybe it was something you wrote for yourself along the way. Drop it in the comments so someone scrolling at 2 a.m. has a reason to keep going. Tap like if this helped you name a boundary, or plant one. Subscribe if you want more true stories about home after hurt, about money after manipulation, about the ways we turn paper into steel and still keep our kitchens warm. I used to think the bravest thing I'd ever done was buy a house without anyone's blessing. I was wrong. The bravest thing I've done is refuse to earn my welcome in it. The porch light's on. The garden's growing. The door opens when I say. And that, finally, is the point.